Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to our robot and our panel, and thank you for staying. We like to think that we're ending with the best bit, of course. So we will have heard over the last couple of days, we've heard an awful lot about robotics and artificial intelligence, and really how that's going to change the industry. We've talked a little bit about skills, so this notion that we really need something like 2 million new people into the industry to be able to fulfill the demand that we've got for the excess travel that's coming, or the extra travel that's coming. And it's clear that that's going to be somewhat of a problem, because we don't have 2 million spare people kind of hanging around ready to jump into the industry. But we do have great technology on the way that can help shape and change some of the jobs that we're doing, so we can kind of upskill through that. And that's why we kind of thought, well, I think it would be very interesting for us to talk about some of the dilemmas that brings. Because whilst we might look at our friend here and see the robot, how are they going to change? So I'm delighted to invite this esteemed panel of experts to join us today to talk about robots at the board table. And I'd like each of them to introduce themselves to you, and actually with a little bit of an interesting feature, and that is, what are you most looking forward to about having robots at the board table?
Hello, my name is Magda. I come from Google Poland, and I represent the commercial part of the Google Poland office. What makes me most excited about the robots at the board table is a better world, a safer world, a healthier world that I believe we can create if we work together, humans and robots.
Perfect. Aidan.
Okay, hi. Hello everybody. My name is Aidan Sander. I'm from Dortmund in Germany. I'm actually a data scientist by profession, and I work mainly with providing aviation actors within the process of using data. And my pick for today is, like what Jen said, is what we're seeing in the future will be more or less the balance between the human interaction factor and, of course, the use of AI. And, of course, as we'll see later, we'll be discussing more on the complexities that underlies that kind of equation. So I pass it on to Nick.
Thanks very much, Aidan. I'm Nick Shackleton-Jones. I'm author of a book called How People Learn, and I work for a company called PA Consulting. I think the thing that most excites me about robots is not having to queue. I hate queues. I hate queuing for anything. Anytime you have to queue, it's because there's a human resource bottleneck. So the idea of never having to queue again, I think, quite appeals to me.
Oh, great, yeah. But so I've introduced our human panel. I'd like to introduce the star of the show, and I've seen many of you coming and taking photos with him. So I would like to ask Hermes to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Hermes, and I have traveled from the Technical University of Crete to join you today. As a robot, I am really excited that you humans are finally inviting us to the discussion.
Can everyone hear him okay? So I'm glad that you're here too, Hermes. In fact, we look at Hermes as a robot, and there's many different definitions of what a robot is. So I think, Hermes, as a robot, you're best placed to give us a definition. Can you please share what your definition of a robot is?
A robot is a machine designed to execute one or more tasks automatically with speed and precision. There are as many different types of robots as there are tasks for them to perform. And so, I'm a humanoid robot, so a little like a human. I play football in the Greek national team, named Kouretes, for the Robocup football competition.
So, Hermes, do robots have a nationality?
No, but my programmer, Dimitris Hatziparishes, who is helping me today, is Greek.
I guess that explains it. I also found out that robots don't have gender either, although this is apparently a male robot called Hermes. So we've attributed a gender to him. And I have to admit, I have a little soft spot for him. I think I might be falling in love with the robot. So before we go on to kind of the discussion, just 2 questions for you. The first is, how many of you have artificial intelligence in your homes? Show of hands, and what do you call your artificial intelligence? I guess some of you are having conversations. I've heard a rumor that Nick says goodnight to his artificial intelligence every night. Is that true, Nick?
It's absolutely true, yeah.
So, I mean, many of us now have artificial intelligence. It's becoming more prevalent in our homes in the way that we interact with different things, play music, do this, do the other. And we're getting a little bit more used to it, and we're getting a little bit more used to seeing these kind of robotics. But I have another question, and that is, how many of you would feel really comfortable getting on a plane knowing that there wasn't a human there, but actually it was being flown by a robot? Pascal, I not a surprise from you, Pascal. A couple of us that are not so frightened. But it can be very, very intimidating to think that these robots will be doing jobs that we traditionally associate with humans. And I think the talk that we had earlier a little bit about this heart and head. Our head says they're safer. Our heart says probably something a little bit different. And then, Nick, I know that you, in your introductory chapter in your book, you talk a little bit about, you expected the robots to be here. So where are they?
Exactly. So where's my robot? The 1956 movie Forbidden Planet introduced us to Robbie the Robot, which if you haven't seen it, it looks a bit like a kind of a Michelin man and was effectively a first sort of generalized intelligent assistant, like a robot butler. And so in the 1950s, people were expecting robots to be part of the household, like a washing machine, a microwave, and your robot assistant. But almost 70 years later, we still don't have our robot generalized intelligence. And maybe that's not a bad thing, because Elon Musk has been warning that they represent an existential threat to humankind.
Aidan, do you think they're an existential threat to us, or do you think they're actually a massive enabler for the aviation industry?
Well, I totally agree that the point is with robots now we are in the next phase, if you like, for how organizations now have to deal with the new game changer of technology. And predominantly, if you take a look what Nick said, I mean, robots is not something new. I mean, it goes back almost 60 years ago. But what we're seeing today now is a new phase of how robots now are becoming a very significant part of influencing corporate culture, decision-making process, for example, and changing the whole element of how we can facilitate better data-driven decisions unlike before. So what we can only see here today is that we are still in a very mature stage of AI and machine learning, of course, but the learning curve is growing. And as a result, I think in the future, we'll definitely see the significant impact that robots will bring to the board table.
Yeah, well, and even the very practical operations. So Nick said he didn't really like being in queues. And we saw some great demonstrations of where, even through the Dragon's Den, where actually robots would be able to help take us to the airport. So in fact, I'm going to give a little test to my panel. I'm going to see, have you got your phones with you?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so we're talking a little bit about passenger navigation and support. Which we know for many people can be one of the most important parts of their journey, but it's often the most stressful. So I'm going to take an example. Imagine I'm flying tomorrow from Dubai to Nice. What gate will I leave from?
Oh, there is only one flight from Dubai to Nice on Friday. Today it departed from gate C13. Also, I have accessed on the Dubai airport map, and the gate is accessible from the Emirates lounge.
Well, thank you very much, Hermes. I guess, no, you weren't able to get it in time?
So I got distracted. I'm on Facebook now.
Well, I love the fact that he knows that I'm, wanting to go into the Emirates lounge. I think the robot knows me very well. But I mean, when we see it and against our human kind of like tasks, it can be much, much quicker, particularly when the right information is kind of put into the robots. So I'm thinking, Magda, we've just seen a demonstration from Google about the great kind of analytics and things that we can do. Where do you really see this going in the future?
I do see it going the way it has actually worked in your industry. I do see it going with humans and artificial intelligence working together. Autopilot. Can you think of a more successful combination? I mean, you are the best proof that actually the collaboration of the two worlds can bring to a better, faster, safer world. And at Google, we know that what Nick wants is just around the corner because the computing power and machine learning and artificial intelligence are progressing at exponential pace. So it's not going to be just, good morning and goodbye from your AI assistant, be it Google Assistant or Alexa or Siri. It's going to be much more than that. And already today, if you are using Google Assistant, it can, maybe not yet guide you to the right gate, but it can remind you that it's time to actually leave the place you are because there is some traffic on the way to the airport, and it knows that you are departing on that particular flight. So we like to think that we live these days in the age of assistance, and the assistance is provided by AI and machine learning. So that's the Google dimension of robots.
Yeah. Which, of course, is advantageous because if we can nudge people to get to the airport ahead of time, avoid queues because there won't be any more queues, then actually operational efficiencies increase, and that can only be good. But we think about, you mentioned a little bit about kind of safety and this idea that humans plus robots is a safer combination. Can you think of any other areas where we would want to see that safety increased?
Do you want to take a shot? No.
Yeah, I'm skeptical. A lot of optimists around AI believe that hybrid working is the way forwards. But we already have a couple of models for that. One is Uber, where actually hybrid working, where effectively the AI is the combination of the app and the sat-nav, has meant much less kind of rights, lower pay, much more uncertainty around labor. Mm-hmm. And the other area where we've seen kind of hybrid AI versus humans is in autonomous cars. And then typically what happens is if the AI cannot handle a situation, it hands it back to the human. What is the human doing? The human is checking their emails, writing a note or something. And when does the AI hand back to the human? Well, when it's an emergency. So in time trials, it can take several seconds for the human to take back control from the AI. So I still think that there are some really big challenges of different kinds in hybrid working.
Yeah, I mean, inherently, we work in an industry that has a lot of risks associated with it. Even from, the work that you do you see where we're able to mitigate against some of those risks?
I mean, risk mitigation has always been a challenge anyway. Since we're talking about the use of, this plethora of data that has to be processed in order to deliver a decision. So when it comes, for example, within the context of the airline or aviation industry, for example, you cannot compromise security, through the use of unguided information. So that's why, as what Nick said, there is still the element that we need the human factor. Mm-hmm. I mean, take a look. I mean, if you go through security checks, for example, that's mainly the key point of airports, where we need to ensure that if we're going to use any type of security measures that could be able to buffer any kind of threats, I think we need the significant relevance of the human factor. Of course, it can be compensated using machines purely because it can, as you said before, it's more cost effective, it can drive more efficiency in terms of the whole process of optimizing better customer journeys.
I can totally imagine, as a passenger, my world where I go to the airport and somehow the security is happening in, I don't know where, but I know that it's happening and that I am in a very safe environment. Maybe I will, with the help of AI, we will find out that there is a safer, faster, more seamless way to go through the security without actually getting to the queue and being scanned here and there. So I would love, as a passenger, I would love to put the leaders of the industry into the driving seat for solving the passengers' biggest pain points with the help of AI.
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's kind of this dilemma there about, all that information is being passed constantly as you're going through the customer process? So as you think about, what's the difference between surveillance and security measures, and how does everyone feel about their data being kind of passed around in this environment?
I think people care a lot less about their data. I mean, most of us now have surveillance equipment in our houses or on our mobile phones, effectively, which is gathering data, listening to us in one way or shape or form. So I think that what's often happened is in the service of a better experience, like ordering pizza, we've been happy to forego the risk that our data kind of gets swapped around. But I guess I would just say one thing is, I don't think it's just about efficiency. I think there's enormous opportunity, to Dr. Stathis' point earlier, to improve the experience. So you said you fell in love with this little robot?
Well, he is really gorgeous.
Well, exactly. And I think your robot could be not just something which guides you to your gate. Your robot can sound like George Clooney or Marilyn Monroe or Minnie Mouse, or maybe even look like those characters. So there's an opportunity to really create a magical experience with automation.
Yeah, so this kind of magical experience is, I think, really important. But when the magical experience for me is actually at odds with a cultural experience for somebody else. So, you showed earlier in the Google Translate, it gives this very, very good translation. But what about the cultural differences that we have and how robots will kind of emulate those cultural differences? How do you see that, Magda?
Whatever innovation is created, whenever or wherever the innovation is created, if we know that if the user is put at the center of the innovation, this innovation is likely to succeed because it's going to, one way or another, improve the life or the experience of that particular person. So I do believe that since cultural differences are part of your industry, it will take into account that when designing the innovation. So not just with how you do the Google Translate, but with multiple touch points.
Yeah, thinking about how to kind of integrate the whole experience, because you can't have it just in a kind of a monoculture at all. We talked a little bit about, queues and improving the customer experience, but actually what we did say we would talk about today is how do we make sure that actually we have kind of robots at the board table. So I am going to actually specifically ask us to think about the board table, and I'm going to start by asking my George Clooney sounding friend, about the jobs at the board table. Hermes, kind of, what do you think, where do you think robots will be able to help us best?
We will be able to access available information much quicker than you, and in conjunction with remote servers, I can extract features even faster from the data and make predictions.
Hermes, can you give me an example?
Based on the arrivals and the departures, at the current time in a specific airport, I can make a prediction about the delays at an airport and how best to staff and prioritize your baggage handling.
So kind of for the panel, if we take that through to decision-making at boards, which is what we expect of our boards, to be able to make more effective decisions. The example there is that we can look at arrivals and departures and actually schedule for you, schedule your baggage, but schedule your staffing more efficiently. But then there's wider aspects from that, of the roles, the strategic thinking roles that these robots could do at the board. What do you see happening at the board if we get robots at the table?
Firstly, I think what we see is some kind of a pullback, where you have AI taking charge of decision making within the boardroom setting. But of course, since we're talking about artificial intelligence here and machine learning, where we're talking about the use of robots, processing tons of data, which none of us as humans can do within that time, for example. So I think what we'll see is the impact of how these robots will be able to make better data-driven decisions. For example, if an organization is trying to look at where are the potential investments, where they could put their capital to support business activity, for example, and using all that data that is being pulled inside the machines, we're able to get a much higher level of what we call decision accuracy here, which basically starts challenging the human factor side. But on the flip side of the coin, we talk about, is this the end game for the boardroom manager now? Of course, it will be, as what Nick said earlier, the concept of creating hybrids, in the sense of where we can balance both what we call the artificial intelligence side of doing business and, of course, the human factor, purely in the basis, as we discuss later, because when robots make decisions, of course, they're not driven by emotions. They're based on pure factual data. So as a result, we will definitely find much more impact in business decision-making as a result of embracing, we are in a digital world now. There's no definitely going back.
Yeah.
We will definitely see more and more AI taking control of the boardroom, for sure.
Magda, what do you think?
I totally agree. I know that once invited, and I would love to have a robot or an AI assistant at my board table. I know it would come up with insights that were not spotted by us in the past. I know that it will make comments like, dear board, why are you taking this decision if this decision has not led to any successful results in the past 5 cycles? And doing over and over again the same thing is not unlikely to bring new results. I would like my AI assistants to tell me, well, dear board, the composition of your board is not putting you up for success. You are not a diverse enough board of directors. You need to bring more diversity if you want to be in the top 20% most successful companies on earth, right? So this kind of, not to mention, and I would also welcome the AI assistant to tell me, relax, your stress level is too high. It's better not to take any decision at the moment. Come back in after a walk around the office or a mindfulness session, and then you will be more capable of making smart decisions. So I can really think of all sorts of decisions that will make my business, professional, and personal life better with the help of AI assistant.
Yeah. Nick, did you want to?
I think data-driven decisions good, AI decisions bad. Let me explain why I think that. Imagine that you are on the board and you have an AI on your board that's making a recommendation, right? So you have 2 options. You can go with the AI recommendation. What happens if the decision turns out badly and it screws up? You can say, it's the AI fault, we went with the AI. What happens if you don't go with the AI decision and now it screws up? Someone will say, why did you choose not to go with the AI recommendation? So I think it will potentially result in a loss of accountability, an erosion of accountability from the board. So I'm a big fan of data-driven decision making, but I think it should be humans who are making the decisions, not the AI.
Yeah, and I think that, as you say, there's a whole different flip side, isn't there? I think that it recently reported in The Economist that actually they know that kind of automated stock decisions are far more effective and efficient. But where's the very fine line between intelligent stock investments and price fixing and playing the market. It's, there's always a negative and a positive side, isn't there? And I think, the thing that we've obviously been having ongoing discussions in preparation for this, because I think we realized we could probably talk for about 3 hours about, the issues of kind of bringing robots to the board. But I am, of course, going to ask my friend Hermes, what do you think about the moral and ethical dilemmas of robots in the boardroom?
Robots don't really have opinions, but I can tell you what my programmer thinks. Nowadays, it is the hottest topic, which the biggest minds are talking about, and so it is hard to have a clear view. I will certainly be able to process information much faster than you ever will, but perhaps you have more emotional intelligence than me.
Perhaps we'll have more emotional intelligence. What do we think about that?
Well, I mean, I'm more an AI optimist, put it that way. Okay, sorry, Nick. But the point is, I think, as you said, Jane, if we start looking at the moral dilemma, of using machines and artificial intelligence within the boardroom setting, the question now comes to the governance side of things. Where do you draw the line of ethics, for example? Where do you bring accountability, is what Nick said earlier. It becomes more of a philosophical debate, put it that way, purely because in this case, when we talk about use of robots to make those decisions, where there are no emotions involved, and then it raises a lot of other questions too, when it comes to how does a robot deal with harassment in the workplace, for example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Being harassed?
Or being harassed.
Or harassing.
Or harassing, either way, yeah? Okay, how does the robot deal with, gender inequality, for example, within the workplace? Yeah. So in that part, there is definitely a need of the human factor, for sure, to deal with these more sensitive topics. But of course, my view is that if we start looking at the moral dilemma surrounding the use of machines, we also have to start rewriting machine ethics too.
Right.
Okay? Because at this point, we'll be looking more or less at what are the dimensions that we need to put in the codes that can allow us to make much more transparent, more ethical decisions. But as I said, I mean, we're still quite riding on this learning curve.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a question of time before we can really, hammer it through at the boardroom.
Yeah, so Magda, as you think about what you're doing at Google and the balance of conversation, how much of it is really about, getting the artificial intelligence to work, and how much of it is about the emotional, ethical, moral dilemma?
At Google, the way we think about it is always with great power comes great responsibility. We are one of the leaders in the AI world, and we do believe that it is a leadership obligation to walk the talk also on all the ethical and all the dilemmas that are related with responsible AI. Therefore, we are publishing regularly the responsible AI practices, and also we are joining other industry leaders in shaping the good ethical practices. So there's lots of work ahead of us, but still it's the, you lead what you believe in, right? And it's the end goal that is so promising that we want to continue that journey, but of course also by inviting all people and all voices and all insights that are insights of concern.
Okay, Nick, I know you're an AI pessimist. Shall we call you that? Or realist?
I think it has its place. I like it that Alexa can turn my lights on and off. But it's worth noting that neuroscientists such as Damasio and Mary Helen Imedino Yang are now saying that emotion is involved in every human decision that we make. We sometimes pretend that it isn't, but emotion is there cognitively, neurobiologically, every time we make a decision. So every human decision involves emotion, and no machine decision ever involves emotion. And so they're radically different ways of making a decision. Because ethics is all about how we feel. Do we feel something is right? there's no chance of a robot ever being ethical, any more than there's a chance of my toaster being ethical. They're different things.
Yeah, I mean, and when we were talking to Hermes's, the real brains behind Hermes, who isn't on the stage with us, I think these are very real things that people are grappling with around, what is good, define what good is, and, do you think we would see, do we expect to see an army of robot boards in the future that just command and control?
Yeah, well, I mean, it might be a bit too early to call the shots that we will definitely see the boardroom totally flooded with machines. But what we will definitely see is some kind of distribution of power factors now between machines and the human factor. Yeah. In particular, when it comes, as what Nick said, the emotional side, which is definitely the missing code inside a machine.
Yeah.
But now what we will probably see now is data scientists and all the individuals that are now writing the codes start devising some kind of machine ethics too. Okay. Because what we have right now is business ethics. Yes, yeah. Okay. Are you fairly treated? Do you think you've been shortchanged in the workplace, et cetera, et cetera? But at the end of the day, I think we will definitely come to the point where we will see that tipping point, if you like.
Yeah.
Where machines will be making more and more effective decisions purely driven by numbers and crunching those numbers.
What would I'm conscious that we're very short on time, but what would your final thought be around, what's the final thing you want everyone in the room to consider as we start to more effectively integrate both kind of AI, robots into our working practices?
Well, I can only round it up I think technology is definitely a game changer in how we do business today. And we should start embracing technology. And what Magda said earlier, the use of artificial intelligence now has become one of the core cornerstones, of course, of how companies can be able to take themselves to the next leap of how they can be able to perform. Yeah. So we cannot simply ignore the validity of technology now. We really have to embrace it, I should say. Yeah.
Great. Magda, how about you? What would be your final thought that you would want people to go away and consider?
I would really love you to put the best aviation experts with the best AI to work on two things. One is to delight the customer experience from the moment they leave their hotel or home to the moment they land safely at their destination. But the other area is, and I'm speaking as a passenger and as a air travel enthusiast, I would like humans and AI to work on making your industry a carbon neutral industry. Yeah. I don't know how to do it, but I believe that by working together with smart AI systems, you will find a way so that people like me do not have to feel guilty that I love traveling by air.
Yeah, great idea. Nick, how about you? Final kind of reflection.
I would just say embrace experimentation. The strategy that got you to here is not going to get you to there. What I mean, many organizations like aviation have improved incrementally over the years by doing things in a systematic way and by gradually improving efficiency. But the problem now is that you're exposed to disruptors and disruption generally. And Google know this better than most. I remember Google Wave, for example, as an experiment, and Google Glass, constantly experimenting and finding ways to experiment with technologies which could be disruptive within your industry and disrupting from within rather than waiting for it to come from outside.
Okay. Well, thank you. I want to thank you very much as a panel. This has been very, very interesting. And I really encourage all of you to think about it because we sounded a bit crazy when we said, let's have a conversation about robots at the board table. But I think it will happen, even if it's an adjunct to helping us make better decisions. But there is this moral and ethical dilemma that I think we really need to be cognizant of as we embrace technology. You say that, maybe robots don't have emotions, but I think he's really fond of me. And I hope I can take him home. So thank you very much, everybody, for the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in fact, I am going to take him home with me. And I'm going to invite Pierre to the stage, maybe after we've had a photo with. Can I put the robot in the middle?
Oh, the picture.
Thank you.